comment, share, subscribe, smash that bell notification, hit that Cash App link in the description box if you want to continue to support free speech. Hey, man, I used to like Dr. Fauci, okay? I used to think he was a cool dude and he was for the American people. Here to give us sound advice and tell us what we should be doing during this COVID pandemic. After all, he's the nation's leading infectious disease expert, right? But then, little by little, I started to see chinks in his armor, inconsistencies with the man, things that I did not particularly like, things I was not particularly fond of. It was basically like watching the de-evolution of someone you used to respect and should respect given their title, but because of their actions and advice, you no longer hold on to their word with such high favor. They did a small piece on Dr. Fauci tonight, Fraud Fauci tonight on Tucker Carlson. Fraud, as I now call him. Him and Buck Sexton got on Fauci's head. Mostly about how he would not condemn protests, in particular BLM protests. But yet, he's quick to tell people, don't go to church, don't go to gyms or schools or college or restaurants or, I don't know, how we can't say goodbye to people, our loved ones when they're dying on their deathbed in the hospital. Nah, you can't do none of that, man. You see, I used to like Dr. Fauci. That wasn't until I found out he didn't have a backbone. Dr. Fauci doesn't have a backbone. And I found out his medical advice isn't independent or science-based. Rather, it's completely dependent upon pushing forward a particular political agenda. And Chambo don't like that. You know, Chambo don't like no hidden agenda. It's not even hidden no more. Now it's an obvious agenda, man. You see, Fauci now has fans. Fauci is now a political figure and a pawn. He has to keep his base happy, and that means he can't speak the truth. That means he can no longer speak the facts. That's what happens when you get fans. That's what happens when you get people following you. You got to keep them happy, man. So he has to now be no longer like this. Now he got to be like this. Now he's got to be crooked Fauci and have double standards. Despite Fauci's refusal to admit it, for obvious reasons, COVID-19 doesn't stop spreading when people are protesting and rioting. The virus is not that smart. The virus doesn't have that kind of intelligence. Like, hey, man, hey, they're over there rioting. They're over there protesting. Stop. Don't spread right now. I see thousands of them. Let's just go over there to the school and to the gym. Let's just spread over there. Nah, that's not how it works, Fauci. COVID-19 doesn't stop spreading just because it's John Lewis's funeral. But you're not going to hear anything about that. And the saddest part about all this, besides its glaring hypocrisy and putting millions of people's lives in danger by not condemning these actions, which accelerates the spread just as much as all the other things you forbid the American public from doing, it also shows whose lives you think really matter. It's not about it. It's not the American people. We know it's not the American people because on one hand, you can't keep telling us how scary and bad the virus is and how much you care about Americans and giving us advice how to slow down this damn pandemic. And then on the other hand, you turn around and say, oh, well, fuck it. If it's for black people, we could just risk it. Just go on out there and risk it. If it's for those blacks, just go out there and risk it. Who the fuck cares? That just makes it look like Black Lives Matter more and they're more important than the rest of everybody's else life. Fauci? Come on, fraud. It's either that or you don't really believe that the virus is as deadly as you claim. So which one is it, man? Which one is it, you guppy? Which one is it, you puppet? I need to know. Let's roll the video and watch Tucker and Buck rip into the little Democratic pawn who went from the leading infectious, what was he? The leading doctor to the fucking leading puppeteer, the leading puppet. Roll it.
Anthony Fauci is likely the most powerful physician in the history of this country. He's one of the forces behind the mass quarantines that tanked the economy and put millions out of work. He says it's worth it, though, because the threat is just so profound. So profound, so imminent, that you should wear goggles and stop shaking hands in the name of science. So it's interesting in light of that one thing that Anthony Fauci doesn't seem concerned about at all are the riots going on, the mass protests where thousands of people are crowded in together, touching each other without goggles. Fauci was asked about this on Capitol Hill today. Watch.
Should we limit the protesting?
I'm not sure what you mean. How do we say limit the protesting?
Should government limit the protesting?
I don't think that's relevant to.
Well, you just said if it increases the spread of the virus. I'm just asking, should we limit it?
Well, I'm not in a position to determine what the government can do in a forceful way.
Well, you make all kinds of recommendations. You make comments on dating, on baseball, on everything you can imagine. I'm just asking you. You just said that protests increase the spread. I'm just asking you, should we try to limit the protests?
No, I think I would leave that to people who have more of a position to do that. I'm just making a statement that's a broad statement that avoid crowds of any type, no matter where you are.
No limit to protests, but, boy, you can't go to church on Sunday.
What was the? I don't know how many times I can answer that. I'm not going to opine on limiting anything. I'm just going to tell you.
You've opined on a lot of things, Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, but
Wow. Finally, a member of Congress capable of asking a follow-up question, and he's absolutely right. There's nothing that Dr. Anthony Fauci won't opine on as long as it doesn't offend the popular, the fashionable left. Sex with strangers online, no problem. Shaking hands, bad. Every day for the past several months, virtually, Dr. Fauci has advocated for a new coronavirus policy. Here he is, on tape, doing it earlier this month.
I can say as a public health official that I would urge the leaders, the local political and other leaders in states and cities and towns to be as forceful as possible in getting your citizenry to wear masks.
Oh, so he is willing to weigh in on specific responses. Government response. What a fraud this guy is. Put on your mask, get off your powerboat, put on some goggles, do it for public health. And by the way, the consequences don't matter. They're just inconveniences, he explained.
I know it's difficult, but we're having a lot of suffering, a lot of death. This is inconvenient from an economic and a personal standpoint, but we just have to do it.
Oh, we just have to do it. Really? Fauci is 79. But maybe if he had like 22-year-old kids who are trying to make their way in this world, in an economy that is headed down the tubes, thanks largely to his recommendations, he would feel differently. It's not merely an inconvenience when your economy collapses, it's the end of the American dream. That's not a small thing. Maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. But if it is, then you probably shouldn't take a pass on the question, are protests and riots okay? Unless you're a total fraud, like a complete fraud. Buck Sexton's been watching all of this very carefully. He hosts the Buck Sexton Show, and we're always happy to have him on. Now look, Buck, especially in the case of Fauci, who we've interviewed, always seemed like a nice guy to me. Not a stupid guy, impressive bio and all that, but you want to believe that he's making recommendations purely on the basis of the science. If he was, don't you think he would have said something about the protests?
Well, absolutely. We've known all along that Fauci's a bureaucrat, but today he really sounded like a Democrat, and that makes people really uncomfortable because put aside for a moment, anything else, if you're Dr. Fauci and you get the opportunity to tell people, if you're as concerned as he clearly is about this virus, where he's willing to do all those things you've said, push for lockdowns, push for mandatory masking. I mean, we've gone from no masks to suggested masks to mandatory masks in the blink of an eye. And now he has an opportunity to tell everybody, look, no mass gatherings, and yes, that includes protests right now, and he won't touch it. It couldn't be any more clear that this is exactly the same bias that we saw from the beginning of this from public health officials who, by the way, in some cases, some of the experts you see going on TV were saying, oh, it's good for public health that there are these protests because Black Lives Matter. That's what they were saying.
So in Northwest D.C., which may be the most democratic neighborhood in the United States, literally, there are signs, and I'm quoting, that say, thank you, Dr. Fauci. He's a political figure now, it seems to me.
Well, this continues with a trend where the left, the Democrat Party, elevates any government figure that they find useful for bashing Trump, right? So we're supposed to believe, federal agents are stormtroopers. They're bad right now because of Democrats. But Dr. Fauci, we call him Saint Fauci in some quarters, cannot be questioned. And I would just want to know, how is it that Fauci also doesn't weigh in on all the people at John Lewis's funeral yesterday in Georgia going back to D.C.? Tucker, they're supposed to go into quarantine for 2 weeks, aren't they? I don't think anyone believes that that's going to happen because rules are for little people.
That's totally right. The death of equality. And we see it at John Lewis's funeral. Ooh, the irony. Buck Sexton, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tucker.